Hi, everybody. How's everybody doing? Good. I've been hearing just such great comments in the hallways, in the ladies' room, you know, where you really have important conversations. Anyway, I want to just take this moment. We're kind of pivoting from the breakouts to our final plenary. I want to thank everybody who both was on a panel, was a moderator, and was in the audience for the breakout groups. They were very rich discussions. I got to sit in on a little bit of several of them. And I think it's just so important for people who work really hard day in and day out to be able to talk about the work that they do really in depth and exchange, as we were saying before, best practices, challenges, and the vision that we have for where we're going. And I think the final session of the low-wage workers panel, I was very struck with how the conversation moved from some very specific things around restaurant workers and childcare workers and fair schedules to what do we really want here? We want a family-friendly workplace. We want a family-friendly economy. I mean, really starting to look at the big picture, put the pieces back and look into the big picture. And I think that's a great segue into our afternoon plenary. We're very, as you can see from your program books, the title is this a movement? Is this a moment or a movement? And we're going to hear from some wonderful panelists to discuss this. And we're very lucky to have with us Charlotte Golar Richie as our moderator. And I just want to say a couple of things about Charlotte, who I have worked with very closely since I was lucky enough to become director of the center in 2013. Charlotte has been the vice chair of our board and has just been a mentor to me and a sister to me and has helped so much to guide the work of the center and always an enthusiastic and very thoughtful supporter. And I also want to say that, you can read Charlotte's bio in the speaker summaries, but there's a particular thing, not only was she a candidate and elected to the state legislature, and not only did she work for Mayor Menino in the city and so on and so forth, but she was the first African-American woman to run, and the first African-American, I believe, to run for mayor of Boston in a field of 12 mainly men and mainly white men. And I think that part of the reason I wanted Charlotte to talk about the issue of a movement is because Charlotte really started a movement, I think, of non-traditional candidacies, of stepping up and saying, can I be mayor? Yes, I could be mayor. I could be a very good mayor. And taking that leap, that courageous leap. And I think that even though Charlotte didn't win, she really was a wedge that opened up so many things. And when I first started at the center, I actually got to know Charlotte during her campaign. And we were talking about the fact after the election that she didn't win. And she was so reflective about her loss. And I said, what if we have an event at the center and we talk about what you won and your reflections on your loss? And she agreed to do it. And we had this amazing discussion with Charlotte. It was called Opening Doors. And Charlotte is a door opener and a pioneer. And so I just want to welcome her to leading this panel and welcome all of our panelists.
Thank you, and good afternoon, everyone. Sisters, it's good to be in the hall with so many sisters. What an amazing day this has been. And, Anne, I do appreciate those words of welcome, and you said a little bit more than I would have advised you to do, so you did not ask my advice this time. But I appreciate the love, I appreciate the friendship, and it reminds me that we as women supporting other women means a whole lot to the women who we support. It certainly has meant a lot to me. And I have felt supported at the center, and so here I am, moderating this wonderful panel. Hasn't it been a great day, everyone? How are those breakout sessions? Well, we're going to hear from a dynamic panel, and before I introduce them, I do know how to turn the tables a little bit. And I'm going to turn the tables a little bit on Ann, because Ann kind of just sort of skipped over the part. She's been here for 5 years, but I think I can say safely that I speak on behalf of our advisory board chair, Digna Said, and the staff who's here. Raise your hand, staff of the Center for Women in Politics and Public Policy. Muna, Denise, Krista, Ann, another Ann Foreman. The board who's here, I see Jill here, but board Tess I know is here. Board members, great, everyone who's here. A little hard to see back there, but all the board members who are here. I speak on behalf of the staff and the board when I say, Ann, you've been a terrific leader, and you have educated all of us about the opportunities to really advance the work of the center because of your leadership. And the issues that you have had us, that all of us have been a part of in terms of trying to shine a light on, whether we're talking about pay equity, whether we're talking about sexual harassment, whether we want to hold up women of color who don't often get held up in a positive way, where we get to shine a light on women of color candidates and women of color office holders with that document that you did. So yeah, you have done some things. And this conference, the snow did not keep people away from this conference. So here we are. And I acknowledge your staff because I know you did not do it all by yourself, and it was a team that was able to make a lot of what happened during your 5 years occur. And, but you were the leader and are the leader, and we have benefited from your leadership. So thank you, Ann. And we want to show our appreciation. So Denise, who is an amazing person and the point person for this conference, so we should thank Denise Schultz. She is more formally, the director of the New England Women's Policy Initiative, and again, with a wonderful team, made this happen. She's here to make a presentation to Ann. So Ann, just if you can hop up here one more time, we'll do this for a photo op. And Denise will come up and present just a token of our appreciation. I wanted them to do that on stage, of course, but that's okay. Okay, that's all right. Come on stage, come on. Don't be shy now, right?
I'd just like to say briefly, because I don't want to take time from the panel, thank you so much for all of your contributions. It's been a pleasure to work with you, and we're all very sad, but we're just trying to get through today. We're not thinking about the transition, but your leadership has meant a lot, and we wouldn't be here today without your vision, so thank you.
And if you're wondering, why the flowers? There are going to be other conferences, and Ann's not going anywhere. Ann has shared with us her plan to take a little time off from being director. She's still going to stay connected, I know, with the center. But we want to thank her for those 5 years of service. Also, she is a brand new grandmother. So she's on cloud 9, knowing that she's going to spend some time with her grandchild. So that is really wonderful. Okay, so moving along now with what is going to be, just a fabulous conversation. I've had the privilege of being able to talk a little bit to our panelists in preparation for today's event. And I know that I am really impressed. I not only my affiliation with the Center for Women in Politics and Public Policy goes back a long, long, long time, even before Ann's arrival, but I joined the center as vice chair of the advisory board when Ann came in, and we've worked together. But I have looked to the center for information and support, and I appreciate the center's collaboration with other women organizations. And one organization in particular that I did want to give a shout out to is the Mass Women's Political Caucus. And I'm on the board of the caucus, and the caucus has a PAC. And I know we had representatives here. Caitlin Maloney was here earlier. Here she is in the back there. And Caitlin, the reason I'm giving you a shout out is that the caucus, which has a different function than the Center for Women in Politics and Public Policy, has this PAC which endorses candidates. And 2 of the 3 candidates, the Massachusetts women who you're going to meet on this panel, were endorsed by the Mass Women's Political Caucus. Of course, we feel very good about that. So you're going to meet these women now. And for the Rhode Island representative who's with us, you probably would have got endorsed too, but you're in a different state, okay, Moira? So we're going to meet you. So that was the only reason that you were not included in this particular endorsement effort. Okay, so let's meet these very dynamic, basically phenomenal women. Ann talked about me having kind of put a wedge in a door to open the door that kind of paved the way. That might be an overstatement, but nonetheless, we all are doing our part, each and every one of you who is here in this room, doing your part to open that door a little bit further. And these women who are coming in, who basically pushed that door open with a foot, I do kickboxing, okay? They lifted their leg up and they kicked that door open and walk out there. I mean, we just have to say to them, we are fortunate that they had the fortitude, the stamina, I joke with Nika, the courage to be able to stand up there and do that with all of the other things swirling around you in your life, to be able to say, hey, I'm going to take time out to do this. And then when you win, or even if you don't win, you still have on your shoulders some kind of a weight which sort of represents our commitment to community, not wanting to disappoint, wanting to really follow through on promises, wanting to keep people pulled together, wanting to seize the day. And that takes continuous stamina and strength to be able to always do that. Because I can say, frankly, sometimes you feel like just climbing into like a little, I don't know, closet somewhere, closing the door, and wanting to be by yourself because the demands are so great and they're pressing and people have a lot of high expectations. They want you to succeed. We want you to succeed. So let me introduce these ladies. I'm going to invite them to come up to the stage so you can see them, and then I'll tell you, briefly read their bios, which I've condensed a bit from the program. I want us to all put our hands together to welcome these wonderful ladies. So the first you're going to have Tahirah Amatul-Wadud. Tahirah. Next, I want to welcome Nika Elugardo. And next we have our neighbor in Rhode Island, Representative Moira Walsh. Have a seat, ladies, and make yourself comfortable. Grab a bottle of water, because we're going to have a good talk this afternoon, okay? We got a lot to talk about. So, Tahirah.
Yes, ma'am.
Tahirah is an attorney, okay? She's got a background in civil rights advocacy, civic engagement, interfaith activism. She has degrees from Elms College and Western New England University School of Law, and she's been recognized by the Massachusetts Lawyers Weekly as a top woman of law. She currently serves as a commissioner for the Mass Commission on the Status of Women, and also sits on the Family Advisory Council for Boston Children's Hospital. Tahirah just came fresh off a campaign, primary campaign, Democratic candidate, Massachusetts' first congressional district, challenging a 29-year incumbent. While she did not prevail, she scored high marks, 30% of the vote, and also a higher than anticipated turnout of voters, as well as coverage from the national media, not always easy to get, including CNN, the Huffington Post, the Associated Press, and the New York Times. Thank you, Tahirah, for driving through the snow from Western Massachusetts to join us for this important conversation.
Thank you for being here.
Next to Tahirah is Nika Elugardo, who ran a very successful campaign, also against a longtime incumbent. And in January 2019, Nika will be sworn in as State Representative for Massachusetts' 15th Suffolk District, representing Brookline and the Boston neighborhoods of Jamaica Plain, Mission Hill, and Roslindale. Nika arrived on the campaign trail with degrees from MIT, Harvard, Boston University Law School, and 20 years of experience in community economic development experience, working with public, private, nonprofit leaders in communities of color. And she's also no stranger to the State House. She's also no stranger to her district, because she has worked in the community. She served as Jamaica Plain Liaison Senior Policy Advisor, Senator Sonia Chang Diaz. She's founding director of Mass Saves, an economic justice collaborative jointly sponsored by community organizations, financial institutions, and she's also the founder of a research and consulting departments at Emmanuel Gospel Center. So we want to congratulate Nika and welcome her to the panel, knowing in January we won't be calling her State Rep-elect. She's going to be just State Rep Nika Elugardo. Our third speaker, and I got a little bit of a heads up. Who's here from Rhode Island? Okay, Rhode Island's in the house, okay. I mean, you know, this should make you feel good. This is Representative Moira Jane Walsh. And behind your back, you've got big glowing praise, really, from your colleagues. And you know what they called you? A badass, okay. But they also said you are an eloquent speaker who speaks truth to power.
Yes.
And we're going to talk a little bit about that. It is, even as we like to say, and maybe even pride ourselves on being able to do it, it is not always easy to do. And it comes with risk. And the reaction is not always a pleasant one. So it takes strength of character to speak truth to power. I'll tell you a little bit about Moira. She is a former waitress turned social activist, and she's a single mom, and a proud single mom to Malcolm. Moira ran for office for the first time in 2015, winning her seat against a Democratic incumbent. What's up with these ladies that they got to face off with incumbents, okay? She won roughly 52% of the vote the first time she ran, so that was a narrow win, a win nonetheless. But this time she ran for re-election, she got roughly 60% of the vote. And that, her race and the fact that people turned out was a big deal because she comes from a district that is a traditionally low turnout district. So she was really pleased that people took the time to go to the polls and vote for her. And she's known for bringing along her now 5-year-old son, Malcolm, to sessions in the Rhode Island General Assembly. And the reason she does this is that she is striving to instill in her son an understanding of the value of civic engagement. And what better way to do that than start when they are little? So good for you, Moira. And I want to say welcome to our panel, all of them. So the way this is going to work is that I'm just going to open it up. We're going to have a conversation. And I have some questions, and I've been thinking about this and saying, wow, what a great opportunity it is to speak to these women, to have them all on stage together and just talk a little bit about their experience. But I also want you to think a little bit about what you'd like to ask them, because we want to open this up to the audience, given all that you've been doing this full day. It's been a full day of conversation. This is your chance. I know you got sort of pent-up thoughts and things you want to share, so you're going to be able to do that. So we're going to just dive right in. And my first question is a basic question. Why did you run? And what were the circumstances around that decision? What motivated you to do this? And let's start with Tahirah.
Well, thank you. I'm really excited and happy to be here. I'm so excited to see as many people as I know, and of course our Western Mass contingent in the house. It's just wonderful. Even with the snow, it's makes it even more special. So I decided that I would run for Congress in the 1st District, which is in Western Mass. It's all of Hampden County, all of Berkshire County, parts of Hampshire, parts of Franklin, and half a dozen or so towns in Lower Worcester County. And as a family law attorney, I get to see people up close in their most intimate and vulnerable conditions. And I see how policy works and how it fails and where it works and it works well. And I recognize that for the first district, we were really struggling, and we still are. We have the lowest median income. We have one of the highest rates of poverty throughout all of the districts in the Commonwealth, declining population. And I just said, how is this possible? So when we challenged an incumbent, I said, because you're not doing your job. And who better to take it to a person in that seat than someone like me that says, I come not just by myself, but as Maya Angelou says, I come as 10,000. I come on behalf of my clients and my family and my community to say, we have to do better. And so it was a 9-month endeavor, and it was magical and incredible. And I think I was a little crazy for doing that, but it paid off, I think, in a lot of ways, in that we gave voice to a lot of the needs and the concerns of the everyday people of the first district. And that's what sort of carried me.
So Nika, I mean, was this something that you knew? You had worked for a state senator, so you kind of had an experience at least being in the building and seeing what people do. Was this something that you knew right from the get-go that you wanted to do?
Well, first I just have to say you give me chills when you speak. That's so powerful.
Oh, thank you.
The 10,000, wow. You got to say it again so I'll remember it. No, as you know, I was a kid. I was raised in neighborhoods. We had to move around a lot. Housing, instability, poverty, and injustice was the rule of the day. And I would not even finish the Pledge of Allegiance. I would end it at justice as a little tiny protest that I would do in middle school and high school. And as I got older, I came to realize that there are so many great people in every sector of society, and we build justice for all together. But even into my 20s, when I sort of moved from protest to community and economic development, protests are important, keep doing them, but we also need people to get in there and change the systems. I was still very antagonistic towards politics. People were telling me I should run for office from the time I was 20 years old. And initially I was offended, even when my very good mentor and friend Mel King, who had been himself a politician and an activist here, encouraged me to run way back in the 90s, no way. But then I was in graduate school after having worked for a while, and I got to participate as a volunteer in a program then called Women Waging Peace. And it brought women from conflict areas around the world, from two sides of each conflict. And these are women who had experienced the most heinous crimes to their person and violations, sometimes in front of their children at the hands of their government, and had responded to that by running for office and winning and taking it over and shaping peace in their countries. And as someone who has had the opportunities to travel a bit and to realize how blessed we are in our nation, as many problems as we have, these women had to overcome enormous obstacles to make that decision. And I felt very convicted that I was turning my nose up at a system rather than getting my hands dirty and diving in like they did. And so I took about 15 years to prepare, although I joke. It was really 12 years to prepare and 3 years to stall. And then Donald Trump got elected and broke my stalling period. When everyone called and said, the Donald Trumps of the world aren't waiting, so neither should you. And so I dove in.
Okay. People who study what it takes for women to run for office say you got to ask a woman several times to get them to even consider running for office. How many times were you asked, Maura? What got you into the race?
7 or 8. I was asked 7 or 8 times. I used to make the joke all the time. I clearly never had any intention of running for politics. Take one look at my social media and you will know that I never had any intention of running for politics. But for me, it was like a low-key level of rage that followed me day to day. I have a son who is Dominican on his father's side, and as a white woman with a lot of privilege, all I could think was, oh crap, it's too late. Now I have a son who's gonna grow up in a world where he's only gonna be talked about based on his heritage or the color of his skin, and I've waited all this time to get involved, and now it's too late. So for me, a lot of it was just trying to really set a good example for my son, who is, my everything. And for me, I needed to be able to say to him that it's not just a man's job to respect women, it's a woman's job to demand and command respect for herself.
Dang.
Sorry.
We need to write that down. So you faced off, all three of you, with men who had been in office for a long time. Tahirah says she thought that the man that she faced off with was not doing the job the way, at least the way she wanted the job done. So I'm wondering, what about the barriers, about the challenges? And I think that we can learn from those challenges, because I imagine there's some people here some women who might consider running for office, but they do want to understand what it's going to take. And usually when we talk about campaigns, you got to raise all this money and all of that. But what are some of the other challenges that you faced? The people that you thought you could count on that maybe weren't there, the institutions that you ran up against. What did that look like, Moira?
Start with me. My first year I thought was going to be my hardest year because I was running up against a Democratic incumbent, so I really didn't have a lot of support from my party. As it turns out, this year was a lot harder. I stuck my thumb in the eye of leadership in Rhode Island.
Come, give it to her. Come on, Rhode Island.
I had mistakenly thought that if I stuck my thumb in the speaker's eye, he wouldn't be able to find me an opponent. So now I know next year, 2 thumbs. This year was really hard. One of the obstacles that I had to face was that my Democratic male conservative Speaker of the House gave the Democratic endorsement to my Trump-voting Republican opponent.
That's some Rhode Island stuff right
Along with $2,000, $1,000 from his PAC, $1,000 from his personal fund, and actually hired people from the State House to come and fly signs for my opponent. And so for me, one of the biggest obstacles was understanding that this isn't the kind of democracy where you hear the bill and you hear the arguments and you vote based on the merit of those. This was the kind of democracy where a rich white man tells you what to do and you do it or you're screwed. And I don't play by those rules. So that was an obstacle for me.
Probably doesn't hurt that you have a posse with you, right?
I do. I bark big because I have a pack. It's really nice.
It makes a difference, doesn't it? Yeah. So that's a learning point right there, right? Okay.
Absolutely.
So Nika, your thoughts?
For me, the challenges were all about mental and emotional and psychological toughness. No one really came to my face and said the many things that were being said behind my back. And being the kind of personality, having the kind of personality structure that I have, things that deflate me are pity, mostly pity. And so my race was long, and my opponent had a different position when I started. He was the chair of healthcare finance. And everyone already was like, oh, he's been there for a long time. You can't win, right? You're going to run, and then you're going to run again. And I was like, I don't have a backup plan. I've already trained my replacement. I'm just going for it. And if their reaction, so back then, a year and a half ago and change, if their reaction was, you go, then that feels good. And if their reaction was, you can't do it, for me, that feels good, because I'm a combative person. But if their reaction was like, oh, honey, oh, pitying me for not understanding the way the world works, then I would feel deflated. And so I had to realize right away that I can't let other people's emotional state control my own, which is a lesson we as women have to learn over and over and over and over again in so many settings. And when people look depending on who you are, it might be they look down their nose at you, that might bother you, that doesn't bother me. But like me, if they look at you with concern, like you're not gonna be okay, like you're weak, and then I realized that's my stuff I can let go of. I can be weak, in fact. I can be vulnerable. None of that stops me from being victorious, just as it has never done. And just reminding myself of that. was really critical, and then the spiritual practices that I have were really essential for that, doubling down on those and doubling down on time with the people that were building me up and recognizing until I got sort of mentally and emotionally stronger, I needed to try and avoid the voices that were tearing me down. I actually forgot all about those voices. By the time we hit full stride, I didn't even remember those challenges until reflecting on the question that Charlotte had asked me, because I just remember the feeling of overcoming. Not on election day, on the primary, but overcoming the need to be accepted by people who didn't believe in me. And once I overcame that, sometime in March, April, when I fully launched my campaign and went for it, we were just flying from that time on.
So mental and emotional strength, very important. In fact, that would be something I say we have to start with as women, is to make sure we're in good health and that we're feeling strong and ready to take the challenge on, so that you can stand up to the powers that be, you know. Tahirah, what about you?
When I think about the barriers that I faced, it was things that you could imagine. Where do you get a media list? How do you get emails? Like, right? I mean, someone in this room knows. I said, do you have a media list for the local media people? And sometimes that felt lonely. Like you're literally starting and you don't know where to begin. And the team that I imagined that I would have in the beginning was not the team that I ended up having or ended with. You know, you think you have those people you can go to. These are the people that you look and you, oh, we're always at these meetings together. We have these same issues, or we're aligned, and then they disappear, right? And so the team that I developed was the team that I needed to have ultimately. Other areas of other barriers and other areas of opportunity were that before I launched, we launched in December, I had spent weeks doing what I called the Kiss the Ring tour. So they were speaking with the gatekeepers, speaking with the power brokers, and it was exhausting. And Bonnie knows, because I would call her at the end of each of these meetings where people were telling me I was out of my mind to do this, and getting severe tongue lashings and verbal abuse, but I had to do it. And so by the time we launched, I didn't know if the rest of the world would treat me like the people who wore the rings that I was kissing. And on the day of the launch, people came from all over. We did a 3-town launch, 87 cities and towns in the 1st district. So I went to the most marginalized, the most forgotten, rural, inner city, suburban areas, and I launched. And as we did it, it got more and more exciting. By the end of the day, like, there were tons of people in the room. I tell you that story only to say that people came to me and they were crying with gratitude that I was in the race. And I received so much love because the abuse that I had experienced going into this, what I thought would be my experience on the campaign trail, and that the amount of love that I received, I didn't know what to do with it. And I ended up having insomnia for 3 days, not knowing how to process that, because it's a burden. It's a weight when people are depending on you. And I learned how to do that in 3 days. So I had insomnia, but in those 3 days, I figured it all out.
I need your notes on that.
I figured it all out. And that sort of carried us through, but that was a real thing. I didn't know how to process love and hope.
Now, in a congressional district, how many people in that district?
750,000,
750.
3,000 square miles, 87 cities and towns, 81% white, 6% black. We won 12 towns in the whitest areas of the Commonwealth, 30% of the vote. Yeah, it's a real interesting.
And roughly how much did you have to raise? I know bills are still coming in, but.
Yeah,
Right.
The good news is that, well, we knew that we needed at least $500,000 in order to be a viable contender. And we raised, I think, about $130,000. So, of course, we didn't raise what we wanted to raise, but to do what we did in 9 months and with $130,000, and we still ended up with $12,000 left in our campaign account.
Nice.
So what I'm excited to do, and Deanna knows because we've been working on it, I'm announcing it publicly here, but we haven't actually, we're going to announce it big, but we're donating the money.
Oh, please announce it.
Yes.
This is,
I'm
you're
so
on stage
excited.
here at the JFK Library and Museum with beautiful, scenery.
It's not a I'm not reigniting a campaign,
Okay.
but we're taking the money and we're donating it to 33 charities in the district or that have impacted the district. And these charities were named by our staff and our volunteers as organizations that were meaningful and important to them and to us while we traveled the district that we fell in love with. And so I want to model what you do with campaign donations in a healthy way. And so those checks will be going out probably over the weekend, and we're going to do some fundraising and pushes for each of those 33. And I just think that's putting goodwill into the world and goodwill particularly into the district in a way that I wouldn't be able to do in my own individual capacity. So I'm very excited about that.
Nika, your district, well, you've got about 150,000 people. How many people in your district?
40,000.
Oh, 40,000. Okay, Senate is 150.
Tiny.
Okay, 40,000. Yeah. Okay, so 40,000. And how much did you think you would need to raise to run that race, and how much did you actually raise?
Well, we have 40,000. Our original universe of voters we wanted to reach was about 7, and we ended up just about doubling that. We wanted to hit them 3 times. We ended up hitting them 9 times.
Okay.
And hitting the core group 11 times. And some got more. And that's before GOTV. And so the GOTV got, thousands more knocks. And so we planned for a $120,000 race. And then about August, when the OCPF, which is our campaign finance here in Massachusetts, filings came out, we saw that my opponent had already spent a couple $100,000 on the race, and we noticed he was spending a couple $100,000 more with the help of a real estate PAC and others, because there was a weekend where we got word that residents got 6 to 7 mailings in that weekend, and they would come to receive, some residents received 20 mailings in the last month from him. So we realized we need to up the game and raise that amount to $180,000 by the end of the year, which we're not there, and $135,000 by the primary. And so far we've raised just under $150,000. So we've hit our goals on time, but still raising money.
And in your race, did you rely principally on social media to try to get the word out, or were you on radio, or what did you do?
This one.
You were doing shula.
And this one.
Okay. I thought that was a thing. That was the old timer campaigning, but you were okay.
Times hundreds of other people.
Right.
So
you were basically knocking doors.
Our social media was used extensively for maintaining momentum with our volunteers.
Yeah.
But my team knocked over 45,000 doors.
Wow.
I myself, 5,500 of those. Some of those are double knocks until you get the people. And that's how we got the word out, lots of events. And I actually was able to stop personally fundraising in June to focus almost full-time on doors and community meetings because our fundraising that we had been doing for a full year was going really, really well, and we were hitting our targets. And so I just felt really blessed that there was so much energy and momentum and talent coming around me. I should shout out to Christina Aguilera, although there are many, many others, but Christina Aguilera, not the singer, but
I was going to say.
I was like, should she do a concert?
Okay, I do have to say, my campaign director is Christina Aguilera. My second endorsement after Mel King was Tito Jackson. Who, so my daughter and her friends, they're in their 20s, at our kickoff, and they're seeing like Tito Jackson and Christina Aguilera on the program, and they're freaking out like, what?
Right.
Old school.
You got Jackson 5 and Christina Aguilera. Okay. Moira, tell me, your district, how many people in the district, and, you know, did you have, I mean, you told us a little bit about your background, not necessarily deep in politics in the beginning, you got into social activism, but, you know, a big part of running a campaign, no matter what level, is going to be about trying to raise some money to get some flyers out, to make a few signs that people could hold at the train stations and things like that. So tell us, you know, what was it that you had to deal with, and how did you do it?
So my 2016 campaign was on a shoestring budget. I think from start to finish, we raised and spent $6,000, and that was it. And that was in a district of 15,000 people. Because as a single mom, like, I know how to balance a budget. Like, we do not waste any dollars. This year, I was very lucky. I got a lot of national attention, and Rhode Island native Deborah Messing tweeted at me, and then all of a sudden...
While we're dropping names about Tito Jackson or whatever, I got, okay, Will and Grace was with me.
My campaign account kind of like... jacked up, and I got to cancel my fundraisers and spend all my time on the doors. So when all was said and done, I think we raised almost $30,000 without a single fundraiser. Wow. And that was all like the median, the average donation was like straight up Bernie Sanders style, like $20 was the average. And like we had little old ladies who would send in like $1 a week, and this was from all across the country just because people were really like heated on my behalf, that the Democratic Party had kind of kicked me so hard. And so I got really, really lucky that like we have some like really impressive, cool Rhode Islanders who still keep, you know, tabs on the Rhode Island political scene. So that was pure luck, but.
That's not luck, babe.
That's skill, straight up skill. I think, you know, maybe full disclosure, I'm a Democrat. I think we all ran as Democrats, and thinking about with these institutions, how we can make them work better for women, for people of color, things like that. Maybe that's the next conference topic, but that's something that we should think about. And that's one of the certainly challenges that I know Nika talked a little bit about, and you know, they're there. What institution doesn't have those issues, right? So we now, when we get into places of power, it's incumbent upon us to try to figure out how to make it a fairer, better place to do our business, right? Let me ask you this. Now, challenges are behind you, right? The election is behind you. And now you will strike me as women who have serious to-do lists. So you got to tell us just 3 things, your top sort of priorities for what you hope to do. I'll start, Nika. I'll start with you, Moira. Sorry. I'll start with you, Moira. You say. I'll come back to Nika next. What are top 3 priorities for this re-election? This is your second term in office.
So movement-wise, it's putting an honest-to-God priority on intersectionality, right? And not just talking about it, but actually being about it. Because our lack of intersectionality is what hurts our message 9 times out of 10. I heard a podcast recently where a conservative Republican was saying that a lot of the reason that he doesn't believe in identity politics or race relations is because the only time he ever hears it is out of the mouths of white liberals. And I say this because our intersectionality really is hurting our message, right? When we pick a rich white man to argue the finer points of representation, we're diluting our message. And so instead of talking about diversity, we have to actually be about diversity. And this panel, first of all, is pretty on point. I'm not gonna pretend it's not. But we also need to remember that like we as marginalized individuals, just because we're marginalized, like I'm part of the LGBTQ community, doesn't mean we can't be exclusionary. I know I speak.
But just give a specific. What would be?
Maybe I'll
policy. Just one thing. One thing that you say. Okay, we got to deal with this.
Budget.
Right? Okay, so
our state budget. If we actually followed our budget, like as a single mom, you can't go over 100% in one category and expect to be fine in another category. And I think we have to have that same philosophy with an actual state budget.
So as a state rep, I mean, like now you got to deal with all these other people you got to work with at the state house. How are you going to tackle that budget? I mean, what's going to
piece by piece.
Okay.
As of right now, we I think officially have the votes to be able to have a say in our budget, which is a big deal for us. But now it's time to like prioritize our budget in a way that's not regressive, in a way that takes into account the economic asks and puts perspective on what we're asking from the lower socioeconomic people in terms of balancing the budget.
So you would go like to the Ways and Means chair with your list and say, I need you to.
I want to start in the State House. I want to get rid of a lot of the overspending, a lot of the bloated budget within the State House itself, because if we're going to constantly be telling our citizens to tighten their financial belts, like, we should start with us.
Okay. Nika.
So one, State House culture. I want to see women, people of color, and our LGBTQ community in top positions of leadership in the House of Representatives in January. January of 2018, that is. With all due respect to wonderful people who have gone before who are white men. Number two, on policy, we have a great team of about 20 to 25 people that are continuing to help me draft our 10-year legislative agenda and to make sure that I'm inclusive of the many champions that have been working in and out of the State House on our core areas of education, housing, and healthcare, and what I call the emergencies of immigration, and because of our federal situation and climate. So great stuff there, but I won't take up the time with the details. Happy to talk with it. If you've heard me speak, I'm a policy wonk, and I know I'll go on and on if I go down that road. So.
No, that's excellent, and good luck to both of you on that. Tahirah.
Well, I think I'm still in this space of trying to figure out the what is next. You know, I'm an attorney. I run my own practice, so just rebuilding my practice and deciding what I'm going to do with that long term. Also, I've become very connected to policies that matter to the 30% of the district that voted. Universal health care, single payer, whatever you're saying that it is, people want it, and I feel like I need to lend my capital to that, so I'm going to probably find ways to support pushes around healthcare reform and supporting the rural community in its needs and the inner city community in its needs, both communities whose voices have been silenced and on whose platforms I've sort of run. So I know that I'm trying to just figure it all out and hopefully get volunteers to help me continue in the form of Team Tahirah to amplify the needs of those people so that we can do what we promised to do, and that was to protect and love and care for our neighbors.
And you've already, as you said before, carved out a priority for at least that's going to take you a few months, which is how do you, share, I guess, the 12,000 that you have in your campaign coffers, which is on your to-do list, right?
That is a big,
so you did talk about
thing.
that.
Yes.
All right, I have one last question. We're going to open it up. And this speaks to the theme of this conversation here throughout the day, which was around the notion of, whether this is a moment in time that these three phenomenal women are here, stewards of their district or their communities, doing these things, who pushed open that door to lead, right? Is it just one of those that's sort of like an aberration, an outlier moment, or is this in fact a movement that is underway? And we saw what happened, a historic year, transformed Congress with over 100 women, first time in the history of the Congress. We're still counting women. The votes are still coming, right? So we can't say exactly what that number is. All over the country. But over 100 women. We saw the great diversity, things that I know my parents who are no longer here would have said, all of us in terms of our history, especially I think for people of color who've experienced the racism and the oppression and things like that, to see the change. Since I served in the legislature 25 years ago, to see a quarter of a century that we now have more women of color, LGBTQ women, women of diverse religions and national origin, and all of these differences, all of us now leading, and leading with a vengeance. It is just so amazing to see, and we're taking it all in. Moment or a movement? Nika.
A movement is just what's happening when we do our job. And so it's only going to be a movement if we keep doing our jobs. And our refers to the people that are voters and becoming voters. I don't believe that there's a women's wave, a blue wave. The wave that there is a wave of people across this country, our region included, my state, our state included, my district included, who are saying we demand to engage in our democracy. And we demand not only to see ourselves in it, but also to hold elected officials accountable for doing justice and justice for all. That means we want transparency, we want accountability. And if you say you can't pay for something, we want you to tell us what you spent it on. We're gonna hold you accountable, and we're gonna follow up. And if you don't do your job, you're out. Like any other job in any other sector. That's the movement. We have a very, very young democracy. We've pushed through our toddler phase where we gave our toddler an arsenal and they blew up the world and took over it like most toddlers would do. And we're kind of stuck in an adolescent phase of democracy. And this region has been responsible for pushing forward at the cutting edge each phase of our democracy, and we're going to do it again and show not only the United States, but nations around the world what an experimental democracy can become when we mature to include all of the people in it. And that's the movement, and it will die if we stop working, and so we have to keep working.
Massachusetts House of Representatives, watch out.
That's all I have to say.
Tahirah?
Well, my sister said it beautifully. The morning of the election, I left the house, but I asked my mom for a picture of my grandparents, and they are both deceased. Miss my grandma and grandpa sitting at like a table, and I posted on social media, and I said, did they ever imagine that they would have a granddaughter in contention, in serious contention for this seat? And I kind of made that my profile picture. But I realized this, that I am carrying on a legacy that was probably beyond the wildest dreams of my ancestors, who were enslaved people, who ended up coming to this country, who were Black Americans, who were Christians, whose daughter became Muslim when I was just a toddler. And I think to myself that my step is part of a very long movement with ebbs and flows, but very much a part of the history of this country with the dynamics and the demographics that I have, but that it's generations long. And I think that's what we're seeing, that we are in this wonderful, wonderful period, but that it's been happening for all of us in various ways for hundreds of years and for generations, and this is where we are now. So that's how I answer that question.
Representative?
For me, I think if this moment does pass, it, as you so eloquently put it, it's our own fault. We're not doing our jobs. And for me, I only speak to my personal experience as a woman, but I feel like us women have kind of been put on the back burner for so long by the rich, white patriarchy that is in charge, that now we've caught fire and we are done. We're done settling, we're done begging, we're done asking for crumbs. Like, we want the whole damn loaf. So I think at this point, yeah, it's our fault if this doesn't go forward the way it should be, because there's so many women in this room right now that are just on fire and ready to get it done.
Yeah.
Well, I know that I can say that all of us here are so proud of you all, wish you all the very best, and we want to congratulate you. And so we'll end this part of this segment of the conversation just to say, go girls.
Thank you.
Okay, we're gonna-
What time is it? What time is it? Oh, okay.
So we are, unfortunately and sadly, going to have to amend our program. We just got word that we actually have to leave.
We got evicted.
Sorry.
Was it something we said?
So much for that. But I have to say, this has been really great to hear from these phenomenal women. I want to thank you all for being here with us, and I want to let Dr. Ann Bookman, come up with the final words.
And thank you to Charlotte for her great moderation.
I'm so sorry to cut off conversation. We actually literally do have to be out of here. And so I'm hoping, I want to, first of all, thank this wonderful panel and Charlotte. I love your final answers. It was just what I was hoping to hear. What's wonderful is that we have a reception now, so rather than having a Q&A in this room, we can all go right next door to the EMK and continue the conversation and continue to ask this question about how are we going to build this movement, and how are we all going to engage. And so thank you for starting this wonderful conversation. We want to invite everybody to come next door to celebrate women who dared to run. This is a celebration of women candidates, whether they won or lost. And I want to just ask you to give me one more minute. I'd like to call Denise Schultz up to the stage. Yes. So it turns out that Denise and I both had flowers on our minds. So I really need to give special acknowledgement to Denise for the extraordinary leadership that she has provided for this conference. As I said earlier this morning, I was the founding director of this initiative. Denise is now the director of this new initiative, and this conference is body and soul from Denise Schultz, and I thank her from the bottom of my heart.
Let's go party next door.
In case you didn't hear that, Denise said, let's go party. Okay. Thank you all for coming. Please join us next door to continue the conversation, and we appreciate your attendance so much.